There we go. Now we're going up and down. All right. Okay, so we're learning it. So I think you want to break it down into several parts. So like this first part right here, that's the famous part, and that's the reference to 1776. So I don't think it's all that hard. 70 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived of liberty, dedicated the proposition that all men are created equal. All right, so say that. Pause and say it. Let's get it someplace where you can't see it anymore. All right, let's see if I can. I'll tell you what we'll do here. Here, we'll go back and forth over here. All right, so say it. You say it, then I'll say it. Okay, so nobody's looking at anything. 70 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent. Think about the meaning of it. You're talking about the founding fathers right here. It was the colonies. It was North America. It wasn't a country yet. 70 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived. That word conceived means born, so it's really probably the most important word in the whole first line there. Conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. So he's referencing the Declaration of Independence. That word conceive, at the end of it, remember he's going to talk about new birth of freedom. So that's a reference to, you need a new birth because the old birth had this original sin of slavery. So the word conceive is probably a key word. So 70 years ago. That's 87 years ago. All right, 70 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. All right, I'll shut up for a second. You say it. Or pause it and say it. Okay, now take a look. All right, so that takes care of the first paragraph. This version of it is just one big line. Okay, so then the second paragraph is referencing the first as a response to the first. And think about what we said. We created this republic, a democracy. People have freedom and equality. And the question was, is human nature good enough? Can we handle freedom? Or will we turn on each other and it'll be some version of the purge or the state of nature or something like that? And it was it's an experiment in liberty, an experiment in democracy, and will it work? All right, and Lincoln saying, a lot of people doubted that we could do something about this. And were the doubters, were the haters, were they right or were they wrong? And in certain ways, we're proving them right. And the war is a test to see whether or not they were right or we're right, that mankind can handle freedom, that human nature is good enough to handle freedom without turning on each other and without it being, this terrible civil war. All right, so take a look at it. Now 70 years ago, 87 years ago, now we're engaged in a great civil war. What's the war? It's a test. All right, it's a test of whether the United States, whether we can do it, or any nation like that. So it's about, the United States being the last best hope of mankind. I think Lincoln said that too. All right, so whether that nation, the United States, or any nation trying to do that, can long endure. Is this the kind of government that's built to last? Or is it just going to fall apart because we're not good enough for freedom? All right, so then what are we doing here? Well, we were met on a great battlefield of that war. All right, what are we doing on the battlefield? We've come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place. You know what that means. For those who here gave their lives, that nation might live. Now, that's not, he's saying that twice. It looks awkward, but if you say it quickly, it doesn't feel awkward. We've come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that nation might live. All right. And then he's saying, it's fine that we're having this ceremony. Remember now, it's a ceremony. It's a funeral ceremony. So what are we doing here? So we're having this war, and we're having this ceremony, and it's fine. It's a good thing to have a ceremony. I mean, you don't want all these bodies laying around, and you don't want to bury them without a funeral. So it's a good thing. Okay. So we got the war going. We're here in this battlefield. We're having the ceremony. The ceremony is a good thing. All right, let's see how we do. Now we're engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. It is all together. Oh, man, I missed it. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. Okay, you do it. I'm going to shut up. I'm going to give you like a minute, pause it, go back and forth with it. Now we're engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. All right, so then it's the transition to us specifically here and now. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We've come to dedicate a portion of it as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. Okay, take a look. All right. Okay, so there it is. All right. And so think about you're the family members. You're at the ceremony. Your brother's over there. Your brother's died. Your brother's been killed in the war. Lincoln is in some way or another responsible for your brother's death. You want to know, you probably want some sort of apologies. And, most importantly, anytime there's a tragedy, we want to know why this happened. Hey, we were just minding our own business. We were trying to do right, and then this is going to happen. Why? Why do we have to suffer like this? He was a good boy. He was a good boy. Why did this have to happen to him? All right. So when you get through the first two paragraphs, Lincoln realizes you still got that question on your mind. So he's setting like the context for the country and the context for the ceremony. And that's all well and good, but you still got the personal tragedy. So the last paragraph is the hardest paragraph, but it's also the most important paragraph. So take a look at it. But in a larger sense. So in other words, he's saying, hey, we know this isn't about me. It's not about you. It's not about us. It's about your brother over there. All right. And so it's the use of repetition, right? It's poetry. Poetry ministers to the soul. All right. And so he's trying, he's being the national minister here. All right. And ministering to your heartache at losing your brother. All right, but in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate. Look what he's doing there. Man, I just noticed that. You've got the repetition of we, what's that called? Anaphora? Maybe. All right, the repetition of we, and then within that anaphora, you got the rhyming. We cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate. Man, all right, greatest rapper that ever lived. All right, we cannot hallow. So that's going to be easy to remember with Halloween coming up, right? All right, but in a large sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. Well, if we can't do it, who can? Well, you know the answer to that. The brave men, living and dead. So your dead brother, also the soldiers who are still fighting, who struggled here. And by the way, consecrate means to make holy. All right, so we're standing on holy ground. Moses in the burning bush, when Moses saw the burning bush, God in the burning bush, the story says, told Moses that he was standing on holy ground. So that's an old saying. So, Lincoln is implying that we're standing on holy ground because of your brother. All right? Not because of us, not because of ceremony, not because of some preacher, not because of some speaker, but because of the sacrifice that was made here, right? All right, so it's holy ground. And your brother did it. Brave men, living dead, struggle here, have consecrated far above our poor power to add or subtract. It's nothing to do with us. Nothing we're doing is making it holy. It's already holy because of them, because of the sacrifice. Let's go ahead, because we know the answer. Let's go ahead and throw this in. Because of the atoning blood that was shed. Atoning blood, is the blood that's been shed to make right this original sin. And so he's kind of hinting at that. Brave men, living in dead, struggled here, have consecrated far above our poor power to add or subtract. Okay, again, he's gonna be humble. All right, the world will no longer remember what we say here. Ceremony doesn't matter. He's wrong, but it can never forget what they did here. All right, so that contrast, the back and forth. Us, we're just doing the best we can. We're trying to put one foot in front of the other. They made the supreme sacrifice with their atoning blood. So there's really just no comparison between us and them. All right, well, no, and I'll remember what we say here. It can never forget what they did here. All right, so then now remember in class, at this point, what I'm saying is, if it's me, and I don't have a brother, but I got 3 sons. So if it's one of those sons laying in that grave over there, or all 3 of them, their families who lost like all their kids, I've got this question. I might be saying to myself, well, I kind of see why people voted for you. You're pretty good with the words, Mr. Lincoln. Those are some decent words. You're right about all this, but still, how am I supposed to put one foot in front of the other? I mean, everything, it's over. I can't go on. How am I supposed to go on? So he's ministering to the suffering who have lost everything in this last section. And he's saying, it is for us. So they've already done what they were supposed to do. All right? Their part is over. But what about us? It is for us. And I kind of, when I say it, I'm going to add a few commas. But notice now, he's got, it is for us the living rather. And then you go, it is rather for us to be here. All right, so that's the hardest part of it. And, I botch it a lot of times, especially if I don't go over that part. But so he's going to flip the wording. All right, but he's answering the question poetically, ministering to our souls. It is for us the living, rather. Ooh, it is for us. So I put a comma. I got another comma after us. It is for us, the living, rather. In other words, rather than just give up. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. All right? In other words, they've done everything they could, but we got to finish the job. The job's not over. We can't give up. It would be, what's the word? It would be an abomination to give up at this point, to make their sacrifice for nothing. It cannot be for nothing, all right? So there's that answer to the question, why does this have to happen? Well, he's got an answer. It can't be for nothing. Not for nothing. Got to be for something. Got to be for something real. Got to be something noble. Got to be something sacred, something holy, all right? So he feels you, and when you're learning it, you got to feel him. He feels this is the saddest man who ever lived. Maybe not, but he's really sad. Lincoln can't be Lincoln without the suffering. He lost his own son in this war, so he knows you're suffering here. All right? So imagine the weight with which he's saying these words. This isn't lightly something that he came up with to be clever. All right, let's go back to it. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. Then you flip it. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us. So he's going to double down, right? Flip the words, double down. Hey, you can't give up. Your dead brothers count on you not to give up. Your dead brothers count on you to finish the job. You don't get to give up. You don't get to. All right. It's rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining. Hit your chest on this one. Great task remaining before us. All right. Then back and forth again. That from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. So, look how well he did that. He didn't just say that cause they died for. No, the last full measure of that last moment. They took that last step before they got shot. They took that last breath. They didn't back down. They paid the price, the last full measure of devotion. That we hear highly resolved that these dead shall not die. It can't be for nothing. Again, we hear highly resolved. It can't be for nothing. These dead shall not have died in vain. That this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom. The government of the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth. That last part, is in reference to the first, and it's kind of like fourscore. It rolls off the tongue. So let's see how we do. Let's see how we do. All right. But, so that last part, but in a larger sense, we cannot consecrate. We cannot dedicate. We cannot consecrate. We cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated far above our poor power to add or subtract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. Okay, here it comes. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who struggle here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us. That from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that they shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. All right. I'm going to shut up for a second. Hey, I tell you what, let's go back and look at it for a second. See which particular words, phrases you're struggling with. I'd forgotten, a lot of times I go that the nation, but that this nation, it's important that's this nation, the one that was conceived in liberty under God, shall have a new birth of freedom. New birth is the most important two words to me, because it's saying, hey, your brother's blood is atoning blood. Your brother died a Christ-like death. He sacrificed. There was a song, Glory, Hallelujah, said, as they died to... It references Jesus and says, as he died to make men holy, so they died to make men free. All right, so the brother's blood is atoning blood. Why did he have to die? Same reason Jesus had to die. To make things right. Things are screwed up. Somebody's got to make it right. The only way to make things right is through suffering. Suffering makes things right. Somehow, the awful... what? I can't quite put my finger on it, but the awful truth, the awful growth, maybe that's it, the awful growth that comes through suffering, the awful make-rightness that comes through suffering. All right? Lincoln ain't Lincoln without the suffering. You ain't who you are without the things you've been through. All right? Nothing good, sacred, holy, important, noble comes easy. Hey, learning this speech don't come easy. You got to suffer a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit. All right? So it's atoning blood. All right? It's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to hurt. All right? But if you hurt well enough and you suffer well enough, hey, the sun comes up in the morning and it's a new day. Okay? New birth of freedom. All right? Okay. I'm going to shut up. Let's go over here. Have at it. Okay, how's it going there? Now, hey, part of this is just repeating it, looking at it. You want to think about the structure of it, think about the poetry of it, and then screw it up and try again. Screw it up, try again. All right, say a few words, try again. Let's do this, though. All right, is for us the living rather to be dedicated to here. Is for us the living rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. Let's see if we can say that. It is for us the living to be dedicated here. Ooh, I didn't do it, did I? It's us the living rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who struggled here have thus far so nobly advanced. Did I botch it? Ooh, I did, didn't I? which they who fought here. So where's struggling at? Am I just messing up? I'm just making up the word struggle? It's for us the living. For us the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished works which they who fought here. That word struggle's in there somewhere, isn't it? He didn't say the word struggle in that whole dang speech. I'm just making things up. There. Struggled here is at the top. Fought here is later. Okay. Raised men, living dead who struggled here. All right. So, I mean, that's kind of what you want to do. Think about what you screwed up, how you botched it, and then do it again. All right, let me try again. It's for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for, all right, so then you flip it. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining for us. So, the second time is a little more focused on us for a second, but then we go back to them. That from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. In other words, hey, think about that. He's saying, hey, you can't give up. Just the opposite. You got to be more committed. That from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. Because they died for it, we've got to be more rather than less committed to it. All right? Again, it is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. Okay? Do it again. Flip it. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us. That from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that they, I don't think it says these dead, that they shall not have died in vain. Let's check.
I want to show you something to make you laugh.
Hold on just a second. I'm recording. All right. I'll come. Hey, let me come to you. I'm recording my thing here. So take a look. We hear highly resolved that these dead shall not have died in vain. From these honored dead, where is it? Oh, no, it's wrong again. Mackenzie, you're just botching this thing. That we hear highly resolved that these dead shall not have died in vain. All right? That these dead shall not have died. So it's the rhythm of it, right? That these dead shall not have died. All right? It's rather for us to be here dead, a great task. Rather for us to be, all right, for us the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought. So it gets to them quicker the first time, right? Is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining for us. All right, so this time he focuses on us a little bit longer. Then he goes back to them, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we are highly resolved that these dead shall not have died in vain. These dead. All right. Okay. Hey, you keep, let's see, look at it like on a sheet of paper and see if because I always botch it. So, don't feel bad when you botch it. This last part. Whoop. Oh, my gosh. All right. Hey, I recommended Bailey. Now, how come it's not going? There it goes. All right. Okay. All right, so we go. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that the nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom. and the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. All right, let's do it one time, all the way through. Hey, everybody look at it all the way through, and I'll say it all the way through. Hey, you can hate on me and tell me, like you can be looking at it, and tell me how many times I messed up. Okay? All right. 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we're engaged in a great civil war, testing whether any nation or any nation so dedicated, so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of it as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. Okay? But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who consecrated it, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or subtract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who struggled here, they who fought here, have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. I am told at some point, some article I read said that he emphasized people, so that government of the people, by the people, for the people. That sounds a little better, doesn't it? Shall not perish from the earth. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. All right, good luck. See, what do you think, 20 minutes?